For this tutorial, I want to do a little quilt show and show you some examples of bad and good backing choices. I've been doing this a long time, and when I'm teaching, especially if it's a class that's a wall hanging, I'll ask the students, well, what's your backing going to be? Oh, I'm just going to put muslin on the back. It don't matter. Nobody will ever see the back of the quilt. It's not true. People will see the back of the quilt. When you give it to somebody, they're going to open it up. They're going to see the back of the quilt. And you want to have everything looking its very best. So this is a quilt that I made more than 20 years ago. And this is my best bad example of what it looks like if you put a muslin on the back of a quilt. So with this quilt, I had to use some dark threads to put down the stained glass portions. You can see every start and stop on this muslin. It just looks awful. Now, I've tried to keep it on the wall for a long time so nobody would ever see the back of it, to the point where it just drives me crazy. I can't even hang it up anymore because I know what's on the back of that. On this quilt, I was using a lot of dark threads for the top, so I should have chosen a dark thread for the backing, but I didn't. I'm sorry, I should have chosen a dark fabric for the backing. And here you can see, even though it's a busy print, you can see all the threads. Now, not that that's very awful. I mean, my quilting isn't terrible, but it's not really great either. And I just don't think that it really looks its very best. On this Christmas quilt, I really wanted on the front of it, where the kings are, to have some really beautiful gold threads so that the kings were ornate and that you could see that they were rich and bringing gifts to baby Jesus. Well, the back of it, I really didn't think that much about. On the back of this quilt, I just used an almost solid black, and you can see where the gold thread peeks back all the way around this quilt. All these little loose threads. It just doesn't look nice. It's gotten to the point where I really don't think a quilt is finished till the binding is actually on it, and that means I need to give as much care and attention to the back of my quilt as the front of my quilt. So this quilt is, I think, one of my best examples of choosing threads, choosing the backing for your quilt by first choosing the threads. On this quilt, very traditional, I knew I needed to use red threads here, and I was going to use white threads here. Well, that obviously meant I couldn't put a solid red on the back, and I couldn't put a solid white on the back. I found what I think is the perfect backing fabric. On this quilt, the back of it is a small, busy print of red and cream. When I was quilting those white parts, I had a white thread. When I was quilting those red parts, I had a red thread, and you can't see any of them. So the backing is not distracted by the threads that I used. This quilt, I used some dark burgundy threads. In this section, I used some teal metallic threads. I used gold thread on the border here. I used a shiny gold thread. Well, then my backing should be a thread that should be a backing that covered all of those thread choices. There's burgundy on the back, there's gold on the back, there's teal on the back. You can't see it. I also like the back of this one because I used a border print. Sometimes you find border prints and you just don't know what you'll do with them. I love a good border print on the back. It just makes it more interesting. I love this quilt because it has a lot of fabulous shoes all over it. I'm kind of addicted to shoes and thread. So with this quilt, I was going to use a variegated thread, kind of dark in color. For my backing choice, I have a small, busy print. So all of those dark threads, you can't see them. You don't see the design on the back. You can see the design on the front. Now, this next quilt was pretty special. When you're choosing your backing fabrics, an easy choice is to pick a fabric like this. This fabric has got to be the supreme best backing fabric ever, with all those colors. All the small, busy print, you could literally use any color in your bobbin and you would never see it. And that was going to make an interesting backing, but not the most interesting backings. I believe the most interesting backings are the ones that you're going to piece with more fabric. It's almost like a whole nother quilt on the back. This is a beautiful fall quilt that I made with the help of my sister Renee. And after we got the top done, I thought it would be really interesting to have a more interesting than just one fabric on the back. So I asked my friend Gina to help me with the back of it. Michelle, can you help me come flip this quilt? And when you're making a pieced backing, it is actually so much nicer to have when the quilt is done. So look at that. Gina used lots of the leftover fabrics that we had from this quilt and using a log cabin as her inspiration. She just kept taking those pieces, going around and around and around. And you've got to admit, that's a really fun backing. The next quilt I have is really special, and the backing, I think, really brings out the very best in the quilt. So this is an Amish quilt, very solid fabrics, nothing too, well, I guess it's exciting on the front, but the fabrics themselves are just solid. The quilt is really pretty, and when it came time to do the backing, my choices were to buy a really, really large piece of 108-inch wide, which I never would have found just the right fabric. But instead I decided to piece it. So I went again to my stash and I started looking through the fabrics. And this is what I came up with. It has all the same kind of colors as the front of the quilt had. All the primary colors are there, but that panel, I don't know how long I've had it. I just thought it would be really fabulous on the back of it. I love the back of this quilt. To me, this is very inspiring. When I look at the back of this quilt, I'm as excited about it as I am the front of that quilt. So now that we've talked about choosing the backing fabric and all the fun designs, I want to show you quick steps how I actually piece and prepare my backing for a quilt. So this is a quilt top that I made some time ago. It's a simple pattern, has a fun mitered border on it. I measured this quilt and it's 55 inches wide by 70 inches long. So to choose a backing for this, I went to my stash and I pulled out this really fun gray and printed fabric. So on this quilt, I'll probably print with mostly grays, and I just thought this would be a fun backing. It's got fun zombie characters on it. It's all about Hollywood for this quilt. I took the fabric, and I want my seam, because if this is 70 inches wide, I'm going to need 2 pieces of fabric. So there'll be a seam running right down the middle of the quilt, the horizontal of the quilt. So I took my backing fabric and I cut off enough that I'd have about 4 inches extra on each side. And I needed 2 pieces of that so that I'd have the length that I need. So this backing is going to be about 84 inches long, and I'll just be able to trim off what I don't need. But I want to show you how I piece the backing. When I piece a backing, I like to use a like colored thread. So I have kind of a dark gray thread in here, and I use a smaller than normal stitch length. Because I'm going to press the seam open, the smaller than normal stitch length will help hide the stitches. So for this, I used a 2.0 stitch length. And you'll notice that my seam allowance is quite large. That's about a 1-inch seam allowance. And that's a 1-inch seam allowance with the selvages still on. So I piece it right sides together along the selvage edge with the selvage still on with a smaller than normal stitch length. Then I take my scissors and I nip off at about a 1/2 inch. So I've got about a 1/2 inch here of selvage and a 1/2 inch of remaining seam allowance. And then I rip it. I can rip it evenly because it's the length of the fabric. So because it's the length of fabric, it is going to tear perfectly straight. And I just tear that right off. Now I'm going to press it. So I need to move my quilt top out of the way. And underneath, you'll see my pressing surface. This is the type of pressing surface that every quilter needs to get. This is what they call a big board in quilting world. It's about 22 inches wide, 60 inches long. I have covered it with a bone ash reflective ironing board surface, so it doesn't have a lot of cushion on it, but that silver is actually reflects up, so it actually the heat works better on the fabric. So and that just sticks right along my big board, and the big board is sat right on top of my regular ironing board. But you'll see now when it's time to press this, I've got a nice big surface to work with. I can pull off all the little leftover stray threads, and I'm ready to press. Now we're ready to start the pressing. I've got my Mary Ellen's Best Press to press this open. I'm going to spray this onto my backing seam. That's always where I start my pressing. I'm going to press the entire backing, but I always start with the middle at the seams, and I'm going to press this open. I press it open because I want there not to be that much bulk. I don't want for when my quilt is being quilted for all of a sudden that I actually feel that extra layer of fabric. By pressing it open, I only have 2 layers of fabric, so it's not going to be that noticeable on the back of the quilt. After I've pressed the center seam completely open, I am going to completely press the backing with spray sizing. If I am doing the quilting on my regular home domestic machine, I like to have my backing fabric to just be a little bit stiffer. If it's really soft and flexible, when I'm moving it around my machine, it's going to kind of bunch up a little bit. And I have found that if I spray size the entire back with sizing before I do the basting, it just makes the quilting a lot easier. Now here's a little tip. When I'm doing my backings, when I'm spray sizing the whole backing, which could be a really large piece of fabric, I don't use my Mary Ellen spray press. It's just kind of too expensive for that. That's one of the times that I go to the grocery store and get a spray sizing out of the laundry care section, usually an aerosol can, and I'll use that to use on the back of my quilt. At that point, it just makes more economical sense. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We wouldn't want you to miss a single show. Please share us with your friends and leave a comment. We would really love to hear from you.